All right guys, in this video, I finally get to reveal and review for you guys a top secret resistance band bar that Clench Fitness has been working on for the better part of 4 years, and that is the Clench Carbon Pro Bar. And also as a mini bonus review, I will touch on very briefly the X3 34-inch bands, and the reason for that is, as fate would have it, these came in very recently, and I thought these actually pair very well with this bar. So I'm gonna get into that with you guys in this video. Brandon, one of the owners at Clench Fitness, was very generous enough to send this to me, and again, trust me in doing this review. Even hooked me up with some B-roll footage, and I gotta say, no one can fill out a gas shirt quite like Brandon. He is a legit beast. But as always, Brandon took some feedback from me personally off recording and also entrusted me and give you guys this honest review here. If you wanna save money on this or anything from Clench Fitness, you're gonna see their bands, their Footplate is over here. You got tons of products. You guys can save 50% using my promo code SBT15. Drop down below here in the description box as well. Now, if you're new to the channel, I've reviewed and covered many hook-based bars that go with loop-style resistance bands on the channel. I think well over between 5 to 10 at least. I even checked out the Nexus bar from Clench Fitness, which allows you to use their patented carabiner system along with free weights. This came out a while back. I'll drop this video down below if you guys are curious. But to me, it was pretty clear once I heard about this bar and the dimensions and what they're trying to do here. Definitely, to me at least, they're trying to compete with the X3 bar. And I personally think they listened to some of the criticisms, comments, and just preferences that people were getting out of using these resistance band bars, myself included. I always said I like the X3 primarily because it's so small, portable, it's compact. They have a longer bar. I've reviewed other longer base bars. Some people might prefer that and it's better for certain exercises, but it's fairly lightweight, but still stable and super strong. And you can see with the Clench bar, not much bigger than this, extremely light. I will get into that. This is actually crazy light, but just to rattle off a few specs here. It's made out of a carbon fiber composite shaft, hence the name, the Carbon Pro Bar, which makes this thing so light but incredibly strong. I'll get to the strength here in a second. This thing only weighs 31.4 ounces, which is actually half the weight of the X3 bar. This thing is 26 inches in length and can easily fit up to a 4-inch band, which I think is probably the most anyone's gonna need for something like this. The other beauty, which I'll get to some other benefits, and there's pros and cons, I think, to the carabiner system, but one of the benefits of this is that you can stack multiple bands. You got plenty of room in here and nothing's gonna be flying out of possibly this small space you have with the X3. Also, unlike, say, the X3 bar, which does not rotate independently of each other, these two sides do. They have ball bearings on each side, which makes these things incredibly smooth. Now, what is unique about this, and this could be a pro and con, again, get to this towards the end, is that since this thing is carbon fiber, you can't go ahead and knurl this like you would, say, something like this metal X3 bar. This, however, is different. I mean, the trade-off is, of course, it is so light, and so to get around this, I guess they play with many different iterations and ways to kind of improve grip. This thing is a funky feeling. It does feel good. It's hard to really describe what this feels like, and I was trying to think of the best analogy of what it is, and then I started using it, and I realized, especially in this dry winter climate, my wife hates that I don't use moisturizer, but real men don't use moisturizer. I did realize though that if I go like this enough, or as I was using it, this thing is like an exfoliant. I will say, as an unsponsored plug, O'Keeffe's Working Hands is key for me, because if you got dry, cracked hands, that really is a godsend, but that doesn't count as a moisturizer. But surprisingly, this thing does work as a functional grip. The diameter seems a little bit smaller than, say, an X3. There are some notches on both sides that are 16 inches apart from each other, like a standard barbell notching or reference points. So despite the fact this thing is not metal, the first thing that might go through your brain, especially as you pick this up, you might think, well, this seems a little flimsy. There's some, little lateral movement. How strong is this thing really? This thing is crazy strong for how incredibly light this is. And I gotta keep emphasizing just how light this is. I thought the X3 bar was kind of light. This thing feels just so much heavier, and I keep fooling myself. And when I grab this thing, I'm like putting in extra force to kind of fling it up, but it is incredibly light, which I will say many times, that is a huge benefit listening to some of the criticisms and comments or just suggestions people have with resistance band bars, because even with their Nexus bar, one of the things I said I had a problem with it was it's so heavy. So if you're doing things like over the back chest presses, it's not a giant deal, but you are kind of supporting this heavy weight as you're holding it. Conversely with this thing, it feels like it's not even there really. But the crazy thing is just how strong this thing is. It's rated up to 1,000 pounds. And actually, I know Brandon did some testing. It goes actually far exceeding that just for safety purposes. They put the cap at 1,000 pounds. They have this crazy machine that he showed me in a live recording, but then also on some stock recording, that is constantly just cycling this thing to repetitions of 400 pounds of load. And I think right now it's exceeded over 1 million repetitions, and the machine is still counting. The point of the matter is though, you are never gonna break this thing, despite how light and it might think it's flimsy, it's really not. This thing is really an engineering feat of strength. And I think Brandon knows a little too or something about engineering though. Now you can see the Clench Fitness USA logo might make you think this thing's made in the USA, which I would definitely love and appreciate it. It is not, but it is assembled in the United States. So what they told me is that these things are all coming from foreign parts overseas, but it is hand assembled in their Wisconsin factory. Now, Clench Fitness is, of course, using their patented carabiner system, which, like I said already, has some pros and cons to it. The pros are it can help stack the bands. These things aren't going anywhere. And I actually do like that because a lot of times if you've ever just messed around with bands once in a while, the bands can kind of fly out. Or what I really appreciate is I can leave these things hooked in, grab and kind of superset or throw them onto, say, a machine. I actually throw them on my collar hooks a lot since I've been doing this. It works out perfectly. You don't have to worry about, say, the hooks flying off. I actually even use this thing in my total gym, which this might probably be the best barbell that I've ever used on my total gym because I feel safe and secure knowing that this thing is rated so heavily, but also knowing that the gate here is closed. However, that does come with some cons, and this is where I'm gonna give you guys kind of a short, brief overview of these 34-inch X3 bands. If you guys aren't familiar, the standard loop style band is 41 inches. And then throughout the years, people have made other loop style bands for various purposes. Serious Steel, I think, was one of the first ones that started making smaller dimensions. Probably not, but at least the ones I'm aware of. They started making a 32-inch, which I think was for these types of systems for like X3, but a lot of people said, myself included, this was actually too small. Then they made I believe it's 37 inches, which is great for some people that are kind of on the shorter side or just want a little more tension out of the gates. I think Harambe's are 36 inches. X3 went ahead and made their 34 inches, which just like everything X3, I don't know why they do this. Hopefully they stop doing this, but you have to be a customer in order to pick these up. These are fairly priced where other sets are going for. I think the Serious Steel one goes for like $119. This goes for $109, but again, you have to already be an X3 customer. They sent these to me for review. It is the same material as their stock bands. I would say it's standard fare. It actually has a little bit more of a stretch and isn't as stiff as, say, I would say Serious Steel, which has some benefits because surprisingly, as short as the diameter this was, it worked out really good with this Clench carbon bar. And that I would say is one of the potential downsides of the carbon bar. Immediately when I tried it, I said the only downside with this is you do have so much extra slack. Now, of course, you could say, well, why don't they make this smaller? I think because they're using the same components and same carabiner that they're already manufacturing with their Nexus bar. The problem though is if you use a 41-inch band around your back, I just find that you're pretty much only getting tension at a very small range of motion. That was the very first feedback and the very first negative feedback I had about the bar. But that's where I said as fate kind of comes in, this 34-inch X3 I think is actually the perfect dimension. I think 32 and even 37s might not be as bad, but this 34 is actually the perfect dimension. So a big suggestion I would throw out to Clench Fitness is to make a 34-inch diameter band. I think that would be great because this is actually perfect with the carbon bar and doing presses out of the gate. I thought it was actually the perfect tension. And actually I tried throwing on a couple extra bands and it got tough really fast. But even as I was using these 34-inch bands for the video you guys are seeing here, I thought even things like overhead presses and curls, they had a lot more give to them than I'd say most 41-inch bands. So I found myself using these a lot. The other thing I really appreciate, and it makes sense they did it this way, is this bar goes perfectly with their Clench footplate, which people arguably say is probably the best footplate you can get with resistance bands because of the versatility, and this thing is a straight up beast. So as you can see, this thing fits perfectly with those dimensions. I've often said that I like a tighter dimension, but if you have a wide bar with a short foot plate or vice versa, it kind of feels weird. You want that tension kind of stacked right on top of each other. I often found even my wooden made Mac boards actually work out perfectly. So for me, this dimension and this length has been working out great. And then just as far as how it feels and performs, it pretty much does everything the other bars do. But what I will appreciate is I actually do like this little bit extra. I think this is the perfect distance where some people might prefer a longer bar. I think as far as an all-purpose bar is concerned, I think they nailed it with the dimensions and just going a little bit beyond the X3. So all your standard fare stuff, bent over rows, overhead presses, actually even doing squats and front squats, I would say are better than an X3. You can actually see me in some clips. I'm able to actually balance the bands. I've been using hands on this. This actually fits perfect for me. Again, it's not gonna fit everybody's dimensions. Curls feel great. You actually have a little bit more space with the band, so it's not rubbing against your knuckles. That's something that sometimes the X3 does. So when a band is kind of underneath you during curls, it easily clears out of the way. Like I said, the only negative for me is just doing a chest press with the 41-inch diameter band. So summary pros, incredibly smooth. I love the dimensions. I think the knurling is good. If you want the traditional steel, that's not really gonna be for you. It's got this, again, very unique, different carbon texture here, which is cool, but also unique and something that is innovative. I will say that. Actually, this whole bar, I would say, in itself is pretty innovative. And it makes sense where you'd think this wouldn't take as long, but it makes sense why it would take and did take them 4 years to create. So it is very cool in that regard. There are pros and cons of the closed carabiner. It takes a little extra step to throw bands in there, not a gigantic deal. And sometimes I found itself kind of getting tangled, which again only really happened when I was kind of rushing it. Trade-off might be worth it when you consider I can use this thing on other machines, I can attach it to racks or various exercises you guys are seeing here. And to be honest, I really wasn't as a fan of the closed carabiner until I had this bar, which maybe they knew about this before they made the Nexus bar. It sounds like they did. This makes a lot more sense and a lot more use and versatility having the closed carabiner compared to the Nexus bar. So with all that being said, personally, do I think this is the magnum opus of all the resistance band bars on the market? Of course, it's going to be individual opinion and your overall preferences, but I've shared many times, I like a smaller dimension bar, I like something that's light, and I like something that is fairly versatile, and this honestly might be beating out my X3. X3 might work out good, like I said, you're throwing it in a bag, and it is tighter, it does feel like that traditional knurling has that cool aesthetic lightsaber effect and look. Hard to say right now which one I'm gonna gravitate towards the most, but as of right now, especially when it comes to the leg exercises, and this is a lot better compared to the X3 for me personally. Also the chest presses is a little bit wider, so it is that kind of Goldilocks effect here. This probably wins out, but the saving grace, which is kind of ironic again, is the fact that if I was doing over the back chest presses, I would be using the X3 34-inch bands. So hopefully, again, this review is helpful. If you guys want to check this out or anything Clench Fitness, promo code again down below in the description box, also on the screen here. Any other questions I did not answer, drop them down below in the description box, and I'll give you guys my honest answer as always. See you guys on the next video.